Yeah, it's so tempted. I'm so tempted to gamble.
In this video, I play 2-5 cash at the Wynn in Las Vegas, Nevada. A drunk girl randomly goes all in for thousands of dollars, and I play multiple $4,000 plus pots. What's up everyone, Alex Duvall here, back with another poker vlog. I know a lot of you like the vlogs, while a lot of you also like the other content I've been making recently, like reacting to certain hands or doing interviews. Just know I will be doing all types of content. As you can tell from the title and intro, this video is a crazy one. Everyone in this game was super deep. It's either one of the biggest winning sessions I've ever had or biggest losing sessions I've ever had. Stay tuned to find out. Now let's get into the video. Let's go. In the very first hand, I have King Queen off and there is an early position limp for $5. The hijack raises to $25 and I just make the call on the button. The hijack in this hand is the crazy woman that I described in the intro, but I did not know she was so crazy at this time. The early position limper makes a call and the flop comes Queen 4 Deuce Rainbow. Early position checks and the hijack bets $25. Maybe I should be raising against such a small size, but I just make the call and the early position player makes a call as well. The turn is one of the few cards that we did not want to see. The ace of clubs. This time the hijack bets $100. Nothing to do here but make the call, and the early position player ends up making the call as well. The river is a 9 of diamonds. The hijack once again bets, this time for $250 into about $350. $250? With the early position player still left to act, I don't think we can make this call. Like I said, I did not know this person was a maniac at the time, so I had to fold. If I knew she was, I definitely would have called. The early position player ends up folding and the hijack takes this pot down. In the next hand, I have King 8 of clubs and there is an under the gun raise to $15. Early position calls, the small blind calls, and we complete in the big blind. The flop comes quite nice, King 8-3 Rainbow. Small blind checks, I check, and action ends up checking around. The turn is a jack of clubs. The small blind checks, and we end up betting $60. Want to size up here as this is a pretty draw heavy board. The under the gun player makes a call. Action folds back around to the small blind who ends up raising to $160. This is weird, but obviously can't fold. I make the call. The under the gun caller makes a very slow fold. The river comes the Queen of clubs. With about $380 in the pot, the small blind bets $160. Not sure how this line could really ever be a bluff, but for less than half pot, I think I just have to call. So that's what I do, and my opponent ends up showing pocket threes for a flopped set. Nice check on the turn from my opponent, and small sizings to get me to call. Could have lost a lot more there. In the next hand, I raise Queen Jack off to $20 in early position. The button 3 bets to $60, and the big blind cold calls. I should really just be folding here, but the big blind was someone I wanted to be in pots with, and I'm getting a really good price, so I decided to make the call, even though this is really not a good call. The flop comes Queen 8-3 Rainbow. The big blind checks, I check, and the button bets $70 into about $180. The big blind folds, and with top pair, I'm not going anywhere, I make the call. The turn is the 4 of clubs. This brings a flush draw on board, and I check, and my opponent checks back. The river comes the 3 of diamonds. I consider betting here, but with such a weak queen, I end up checking. My opponent on the button ends up betting $290. This is about a pot-sized bet, and he's leaving about $600 behind. This is a really annoying spot and the type of spot we get into when we play junk hands like this pre. Maybe my opponent is capped to not having a queen when they check back the turn, but maybe they are also just implementing some pot control with a hand like king queen or ace queen. This might seem like a standard call, but I just felt really bad about it at the time, and we were 3 ways pre. I just don't really put my opponent on many bluffs here, so I ended up making the fold. Also, the bet, check, bet is one of the most common value lines there is in poker, so I don't really feel too bad about this fold. In the next hand, I have king queen off again, and this time I raise an early position to $20. The button and the big blind both call. The flop comes king queen deuce with 2 diamonds. Big blind checks, and with top 2 pair and a diamond here, I'm covering a lot of the board. For this reason, I decide to check, hoping the button bets as he has been aggressive. Unfortunately, he checks back. The turn is the deuce of hearts. Big blind checks, and this time we bet $35 into about $60. Just the button makes a call. The river is the 3 of diamonds. With the flush coming in, I am not too concerned as I have the king of diamonds, so I bet for value. I bet $100. My opponent makes a call, I show, and we are the winner. Before we get into the next hand with the drunken maniac woman we've been talking about, I just want to feature a few hands between her and a few others at the table. At this point in the night, it's become very obvious that this woman is insane and is giving away money. For this reason, we are trying to play basically any hand with her. This is why you see us limp calling queen deuce off in this hand. The flop is ace high and no good for our queen deuce, so we fold, but someone ends up betting $50 on the flop and the woman ends up check raising to $1,100. Let's see how this plays out.
I'm gonna shove all in right now.
How much do you have left?
I'm about to double it from you, so
Alright, I'm all in.
let's see what I have. You're on?
John Lee.
On. Sorry.
John Lee. Do you have a seat?
Yeah.
One seat? Yes.
No more action. You said all in. You retrieve your hand from
Sorry, I'm not on.
Yeah, there's no more action. You said all in. You said all in.
You win.
Oh my lord. That's fine, yeah. You have me scared every time.
That's right, this woman check raised $50 to $1,100, then called it off with bottom pair. There was some confusion there as she was going to fold, then took her cards back and called the all-in. We are just getting started.
Yeah. In
this hand, the Maniac woman has opened for $10. Many people call as expected, and someone ends up raising to $500.
It's so tempted. I'm so tempted to gamble.
The woman ends up folding, but believe it or not, this happens again. Thankfully, the woman does fold again, but someone else at the table ends up calling. But not before the woman says this.
You're fucking dumb. Ooh.
Not gonna lie, that was a nice fold. The guy who called the $500 raise pre ends up check jamming the ace high flop for something like $2,000 effective and shows ace 10 off, while the person who raised for $500 pre shows aces for top set. If you thought this was a big hand at 2-5 between these two, wait for the next one, where the same guy who just flopped a set of aces ends up flopping a set of fours and doubling up again in a 10k plus pot. Somehow this guy got paid versus who knows what in the biggest 2-5 pot I've ever seen. The action does not end there, as the drunken woman to my left ends up getting it all in on the flop with bottom pair, but ends up turning 2 pair versus the opponent who had just doubled up with aces and then that set of fours. This woman now has a 4k plus stack. We finally get into a big hand with her. I have 9-8 off and I either straddle or I end up limping for $10. Not sure, don't remember. This is of course not something I would generally do, but with this Maniac woman to my left, I want to see what she does, which in this case, she ends up raising to $75. Two others in this hand end up making the call and the flop comes ace, ace, 9. With only $300 in the pot, the big blind checks, I check, and the woman bets $800. A player in late position ends up folding, the big blind ends up folding, and now action is back to me. This is basically the moment I have been waiting for. I have a pair in this spot where this opponent can literally have anything. With that said, this is a big bet, $800 into $300. So obviously, I am not feeling great about it. With more and more time I spend in the moment thinking about the hand, the more and more I'm leaning towards folding. Although my opponent obviously likely does not have an ace, she can still have a hand with a lot of equity like spades or 2 overs to my 9. While I'm contemplating a call, this woman starts talking.
I'm just gonna shove over you and I'm gonna like take your entire stack, so.
I know.
I'm gonna save you some money here. Shove right now, and I'm gonna shove over you and you're done.
I'll fold. And in the moment, I ended up folding. I guess I just didn't want to take the chance, even though, looking back, this was a bad fold. I really should have called. I'm not saying this just because the woman does end up showing the Jack 5 off as a bluff. I'm saying this because she was a Maniac, and I called $75 pre in hopes of hitting any pair, which I ended up doing, but I didn't end up sticking with the hand and calling in the moment, which I really regret. I especially regret this as I did not have any better chance to make money from this woman, as she ended up leaving shortly after. Let's try to make up for it in one of the biggest hands of the night. There is an early position limp for $5. The hijack raises to $40, and we 3-bet from the big blind to 180 with pocket queens. Both the limper and the pre-flop raiser end up making the call. We go 3 ways to a flop that comes Jack, 10, 7, 2 diamonds. With 540 in the pot, I want to play this hand pretty straight up. I start off by betting pretty big, $300. Just the hijack makes the call. The turn is the 4 of hearts. This doesn't really change anything, but I decide to check for some pot control. My opponent ends up betting $400. As I said from the beginning, this was a wild game. While there's a chance I could be completely dominated here by something like pocket jacks, pocket 10s, pocket 7s, or 9-8 for a straight, we do unblock diamonds and hearts, the two flush draws on board. For this reason, I take some time, buckle in, and end up check jamming for $14.89 total.
All in?
To my delight, my opponent does not snap call. He does, however, eventually make the call. There's now over $4,000 in this pot, and the river comes the 8 of diamonds. This is a very bad card as the front door flush comes in.
That's not a good river. I've just have queens.
Wow.
You call.
Pair
Wow.
and the straight draw.
Fucking terrible.
Nice hand. That's close.
Oh wow, I thought you flopped a joint, dude.
My opponent ends up showing 10-9 off for a gut shot rivered straight. This one was brutal. I think I played this one fine, obviously just really unlucky. Time to rebuy for $1,500 and get back in this insane game. Not too long after, I pick up pocket 10s and raise an early position to $20. The button and the cutoff make the call. The button in this hand is the same player that just sucked out on us. The flop comes 10-9 deuce. I flop top set. Maybe it's time for some sweet revenge. Being out of position, I start with a check in hopes that one of these aggressive players will bet, but this unfortunately does not happen as action checks through. The turn comes the ace of diamonds. This is another spot where I thought one of the other two opponents could definitely have an ace. In that case, they would bet, I would get to check raise, but unfortunately, once again, action ends up checking through. The river is the 8 of spades. Time to finally go for some value. I bet $50 into about 60. The middle position player folds, but the button raises to 250. Although two hands now beat us 6-7 and queen jack for a straight, at the time I was thinking it was just way too tight to just call here. In my head, I had decided to min raise to 550 and fold if my opponent went all in. We definitely got the min raise part down, but when my opponent does in fact go all in for my remaining $1,000, my plan goes out the window as I can't help but make the call. This guy was obviously a bit of a maniac, but I don't think we're ever going to see him bluff here. It's basically queen jack and that's it. I really played this hand pretty poorly from the beginning. I should have been betting, and although the whale in this hand sucked out on me on the river again, I should have definitely just called the check raise and certainly should have folded after my min raise and the jam. Can't help but think I was just really tilted from the pocket queens hand. What's up, guys? Oh man, I'm just doing a little reflection video. That 10-9 where we had queens, that was so tilting to lose that hand, and then we kind of just called it off with that set of 10s versus the guy's river queen jack straight for the nuts for $1,500. So really bad decision there, and I think I was really just tilted. I was planning on just min raise folding to his 3-bet on the river, but I just went with it. Definitely cost me, and yeah, I'm quite tilted right now. This is probably the biggest I've ever lost in one session, like 4,500. That's a lot for 2-5, but the game was insane with that chick from the very, very beginning. It does suck, but to help me feel better, be sure to like the video, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
You're fucking dumb. Ooh.